Hey, Steve, I want to go back to Steve. Can you hear me, Steve?
I can hear you fine. How are you today, Jesse?
Why couldn't Ryan hear me?
You know what it is? I was actually watching a video today about how people no longer talk to each other. They use people as an opportunity to, like, pontificate or grandstand. So I don't think he was having a conversation with you. I think he was using your time to talk to other people.
It sounds like that. That's a good point. But go ahead,
I wanted
Steve.
to talk to you about, and it's funny because we were talking, originally I wanted to talk to you about Christianity and part of the issue with people being so wimpy in Christianity today.
Yes.
I think a problem with it is, and it's a good part of Christianity, which is that we very heavily focus on guilt. For example, in Islam, they don't care about the history of slavery because it's justified in their books and their teaching.
Yep.
Whereas in Christianity, we suffered from it, and we don't ignore it, but we want to atone for it.
Yep.
Christians want to atone, I believe, and I believe a lot of people take advantage of that, and a lot of Christians don't realize they're being taken advantage of at the same time.
That's a good point, man.
Now,
very good point.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Jesse, go ahead.
That was a very good point you made.
Now, I wanted to talk to you about one other thing. I'm a single dad of 3 daughters, so you were talking to a viewer today about parenting, and I talked to people about perspective. Now, I'm going to use my dad for an example. Growing up, and I'm sure we'll talk more about this because we talk about fathers a lot. But my father growing up was a very manipulative person, and when he would do something nice for people, it would be so that they owed him something, or because he did something bad and wanted to try to, like, smooth things over. So what my dad would do is if you did something nice for my father, he would assume that just like when he would do something nice, it was for the same reasons he did. So he thought if you were doing something nice for him, he got suspicious because, oh, what did they do? Or, oh, what do they want? He couldn't even imagine people would do it for a genuine reason. And I believe Christians have that problem too, but in reverse, where Christians walk around generally doing nice things, doing nice for people, and they think it's appreciated and taken at face value. And people have a tendency to say, oh, those Christians are just doing that because they want to appear this way. Oh, they want to, or they do it because they're feeling guilty. And they don't think about these things. And I think it's a balancing act because the guilt part of Christianity is beautiful. It keeps us human. It keeps us able to look at people that are different and try to humanize them. But at the same time, you can't live your life feeling guilty about everything and everything people did before you were even born. The guilt is a balancing act, and people get taken advantage of because they don't want to feel not guilty. They want to be helping people. They want to atone. They want to be better.
Number one is the reason that Christianity is weak today. The primary reason is that men are weak.
Correct.
It's men who bring in Christianity into the world because Christ worked through men. Well, God worked through men. And if men are not the light of the world, then the light goes out. And then the women try to take over, but they can't because
it's a different world.
It's not in them. It's in the men too. So that's why the woman looks up to the man as the man look up to Christ, right? And so that's why Christianity is weak today, because men are weak.
Now, I'm not sure. I follow you sporadically, but I talked about how now I'm not going to say black culture because there's different forms of it. When I talk about inner city black culture and the crime aspects of it, I always laugh because people, they look at me weird when I say that thugs and gang members are the most feminine people ever. They don't respect other people. They don't command respect. They get emotional if you do something like step on their shoes or make fun of their hair. They groom excessively. They have 15 different pairs of shoes to match their clothes, even if they have nothing else but that. And it's very feminine. They fight over things because they can't use their words like men.
And have you heard
me? They want to be overly emotional and responsive. They want to hurt. Like, for example, I say when men, you and I have a disagreement, we may call each other names, we may punch each other, but at the end of it, we're kind of okay with it. Women, they aim to scar each other. They try to ruin relationships. They bring in past secrets between people. They ruin husband relationships like that too, because they take one thing a man trusted in that woman sometime in her life, and then she uses it against him, and especially in a hurtful way when he's most vulnerable. Women have a tendency to do those things that scar, and men, we look at it more, we got over it.
Yeah. Well, you know why? Have you heard me say why the black people, not all, but most men and women especially men, are so feminine? Are so emotional. Have you heard me? Because they have their mother's nature. In the last 60 years or so, since the takeover of the black women and the government, men have truly lost the identity of being a man. Because you're right, a real man would never hold a grudge. A real man would forgive, speak up.
I struggle with that every day, Jesse.
So what?
I struggle with those things every day. One day I'll talk to you about my father, but that's a long story. But like you're talking about masculinity and femininity. Now, for just a little bit of context, I'm a Marine Corps veteran. I went away to boot camp when I was 21. I spent my 22nd birthday at boot camp in Paris Island. Prior to that, I was a mama's boy. And I kind of look at it today very interesting, because the person I thought I was going into the Marine Corps, it wasn't there. The foundation was there.
Right.
But it wasn't. And I realized, so I went there, and I mentioned briefly about my father. Me and him didn't have a relationship. So for me personally, boot camp was the first time I was like, look at these men. They're examples. I want to be like them. It's not they want to be mean to me. It's not they belittle me. It's like they're setting examples.
Yes.
And I realized at that point, I was like, I love my mom. And being raised by my mom was wonderful, because especially now I have 3 daughters. And I have an emotional look that most people don't, but at the same time I was a sissy. And I didn't become a man until I got away from my mother at 21 years old. And some drill instructors started yelling at me and instilling into me what a man was.
Yes.
And I didn't even realize that, Jesse, until several years after I got out of the Marines and had my first kid. All these things started to click, and you look at things differently. Now, it's not just me being responsible for me. I got to look at the world for these kids, and I started seeing these things. It's a beautiful thing, having those kids, because they make you look at yourself if you're a good parent, and that's what's lacking in parents today.
Have you forgiven your...
We want to put pictures of them on face page and blah, 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 and that's how we use kids to make ourselves feel better about ourselves. We should be suffering for our kids. It should not be easy.
Have you forgiven your mother?
My mom is the most important thing. I love my mother. I say it's a very interesting thing, because I don't resent my mother for anything.
Have you forgiven your mother?
She did as a woman.
Have you forgiven your mother?
Yes, absolutely. Me and my father are the issue.
Did you go to your mother?
Current dilemma.
Did you go to your mother and forgive her?
Absolutely. I talked to my mother the day before she passed away of cancer. So
and what did you forgive?
When my mother passed, there was no aching in my heart. It was.
What did you forgive her for? What did you forgive her for?
My mom was in the age. I'm sure you know, because you lived through it. My generation doesn't understand it.
Tell me real, because of time. See, what did you forgive your mother for?
For making decisions that I think if she could look at now, she would make different. Women were expected to sacrifice differently than women are today, I believe.
And what did she say? Hold on. What did she say when you forgave her?
I don't think she even knew I was forgiving her. I was just telling her how much I love her.
Oh, you didn't tell her you were sorry for hating her?
I didn't phrase it like that. I just said, Mom, I love you. You have done
But you don't love
so much.
You don't love your mother.
Can you explain that? Because I think I do.
Do you love your father?
No.
If you don't love your father, it's impossible to love your mother.
Then you may be right. I would love to. I know you said time is short, but one day I said I'm going to be calling more. I would love to talk to you about my father, because that is the current thing I'm navigating through in my life right now. I'm having a lot of issues with it. And I'm struggling with it. And I think it's necessary, because I don't want to feel the way I do about my father.
Well, you need to forgive your father.
For my father that I don't feel.
What did he do to you? What did your father do to you?
It was he was he was an alcoholic, abusive, and a lot of what I see, I'm angry at my father towards the way my mom's life ended up after. He kind of ruined my mom's life.
Steve, what did your father do to you?
Beat, abused. He didn't instill fatherhood in me. He didn't instill what a man was, what a father and a husband should be. He just basically beat us.
Hey, Steve, what did your father do to you?
Hit me, ignored me, and didn't raise me like a son.
Because you were too close to your mother. He couldn't. You identified with your mother. And so you treated him the same way your mother treated him.
Yes, you're not incorrect at all. The moment I had the first chance, I want to say 15, I'm going to say ninth grade. So I finished ninth grade when my parents were together. And then 10th grade, when my parents got divorced, I went to live with my mom, and I never really looked back.
Steve, you got to go to apologize to your father for that. You were wrong.
I'm getting there.
And don't go fussing with him.
Now that I'm a father myself, I'm starting to see things a lot differently.
But listen, don't go argue with him like a woman. You go and forgive him because you treated him in the same way your mother treated him. You never find out what happened. You identified with your mother. You became a woman.
No, I have a question for you, Jesse.
Hold on, buddy. Hold on. Don't hang up, all right? Do not hang up. So, Steve.
Yes, sir.
Do you realize that if you don't love your father, you love no one?
I don't agree.
Why you don't agree?
I think I learned to probably love my daughters a little better. I have 3 daughters now.
But, Steve, you do not love your daughters. You love your daughters with a woman's love. You don't love your daughters with a man's love, which is of God.
Elaborate.
And that emotional love that you feel for your daughters is not real love at all. It's an emotion that comes from hatred, from anger. And if you don't overcome that, do you have a wife? Are you married?
No, I'm divorced.
And are you raising your daughters?
Yes.
And how did you end up with them and not your wife, your ex-wife?
She gets them on a part-time basis.
Oh.
But she's not from Michigan. You mentioned I'm from Michigan, so when originally we got divorced, she wasn't sure if she was staying in Michigan or leaving. And for me, I was never giving up my kids any way, shape, or form anyway. So
right on. Well, I urge you to forgive your father because you hated your father for no reason.
Can I ask you a question about that, Jesse? Because I have
you had a question for me, right? Go ahead.
What is your definition of forgive? Because I get hung up on definitions, and I'm curious. When you say that, what do you mean exactly, or from what perspective? Like, how do you define forgiving? And I say that because some people say it trivially. Some people do it because they think when they get comfortable with what someone did, and it's not an act of forgiveness. It's an act of being able to tolerate that person in spite of what they did. I'm curious on how do you describe true forgiveness from your perspective?
When you get to know yourself, you're going to see that there are things in your life that you have done and are doing until you overcome that, where you do not want to do or would not want to do, but you can't help yourself. That is something else inside of you driving you. And that when you see that, you know that is wrong, you want to overcome it. And so because you realize it's a spirit that's made a home in you and that you're not in control. It is in control of you. And so when you realize that, it helps you to realize that other people, no matter how mean or nasty or cruel or sinful or whatever they are, you realize that they cannot help themselves. And by realizing that, you don't hate them for what they are. You won't agree with it, but you just won't hate them for it. And so what you do, you would go and forgive them for being that way so that God can forgive you and you could be a light unto the world.
Can I ask you a question, Jesse?
Yes.
Okay, and this is hypothetical and for some context, but now if you met me and I'm rude to you and just a vile person, and do you consider forgiving me if I walk away the moment you forgive me being the exact same person, or is your expectation of forgiveness based on change?
My expectation has no expectation from you at all. I forgive because it's the right thing to do, and God forgive me. I wouldn't care less if you changed or whatever. I don't expect you to change because I forgive you. That's between you and God. You can suffer and die, or you can forgive and live. But I don't expect any change about you at all when I forgive you. I just want God to forgive me.
Well, then, based on that, Jesse, I think I may have forgiven my father. Part of the issue that I have currently with my father is that it's difficult for me to sit across from a person who is the same person they were 20 and 30 years ago. So I tell, and for some context, I was talking to my sister about this, and I say my dad has changed so much and done so much. My father was going to do like shock therapy when it was still legal. He wanted to change, and the sad truth is, at that point, therapies stunk, and a lot of stuff didn't stick.
See, you have not forgiven your...
He was a byproduct of a even worse father, yes?
You have not forgiven your father at all. You still hate your father. You sound like it. You sound just like your mother. I don't
think you're listening, Jesse.
I hear her voice coming through you, because if
I've come to terms with my father and understand what he did.
No. Hold on. See, had you forgiven your father and you sat across from him, and however he acted would be on him, it wouldn't bother you at all.
Correct.
Because you would have.
We sat across from each other and we've had these conversations.
But you have not forgiven him.
And this is, I guess, if I could reel this in, Jesse, this is my question for you.
Okay.
I feel I've forgiven my father, okay? But, and you may be right, because this is where I'm really, really struggling. I feel that if my father died tomorrow, I wouldn't really care, and I don't love him. So it's like I've come to the point where I understand, and because I've had these conversations, my father told me these things he went through, and it makes me appreciate him and understand, but it doesn't feel that, it doesn't put a feeling of love, and maybe it will, and maybe I'm just so not used to it, but that's what I'm struggling with, is the fact that I understand. I feel, I don't want to say sad for my dad, I'm proud of him. He struggled through a lot where most people would have killed themselves, killed people around them, or just imploded their lives, and he struggled through it, and is today where he is because he struggled through it, and it's admirable, it's beautiful.
So what's your question for me?
That doesn't mean that I don't feel. That doesn't mean that now, after 35 years of not feeling anything, that I feel, love for him, and that kind of scares me, because I feel like a respect for him, and I can see that, but it doesn't fill now another part of me where I feel like maybe I should love him, and I don't know. Do you think that's normal, or do you have any suggestions or advice? Because that's what I'm really struggling with. I feel like I should feel for my father where I don't.
What I suggest is that you forgive your mother for turning you away from your father. Your father didn't do anything to you. Your father couldn't deal with your mother. Your mother wasn't a nice lady at all, and she made you turn away from your father to her, and all that you think and feel about your father is not of you, it's your mother in you. Even though she's dead, she still lives in you. And when you hate your father with your mother's hatred, and you need to, I recommend you see this for yourself, and you stop hating your father. Go to your father, once you see it for yourself, and forgive him for hating him. He didn't do anything to you. You hated because you identified with your mother, and she played victim. Your mother was not a victim, but you feel like she was because you have identified with her. Are you doing my silent prayer?
No, in fact, the gentleman that you spoke to, I think 2 or 3 callers ago, I heard that, and then I saw the link. So I was going to, as soon as I got off with you, I was going to investigate that.
Yeah, you start doing the silent prayer so you can see for yourself. Because if you don't love your father, you would never love God. You would never know him. You'll know about him, but you won't know him. You got to love your earthly father. Your father didn't do anything to you, first of all. And if he had, you will still need to forgive him so your soul can reconnect to him, to God, through him to God. But otherwise,
I'm struggling, Jesse. Can I call you back a couple times? Like I say, be a normal staple on your show, because this is what I'm struggling with. And
yeah, anytime you get a wild hair, you can call. Yeah, you're welcome to. But listen, if you don't, your daughter, because real men make boys first, your daughter will suffer because you're going to give their mother's love. I know somebody I'm dealing with right now. They gave their child mother's love and not daddy's love. And my concern is that the child is going to down the road, have a rough life. You got to overcome.
That's my biggest concern.
Yeah, you got to overcome mama. Yeah, you're going to raise your daughters just like a woman would, and they're going to catch hell. Because you're all emotional just like a woman. You got to overcome your mother. Forgive her for turning you away from your father.
Can I ask you another short question?
Real fast, and then I got to run, but you feel free to call me anytime.
If you're angry all the time, but you don't act on anger, speak in anger, or outwardly express that, do you consider that person an angry person, or do you consider the act of it makes them an angry person?
No, that person is an angry person, whether they act on it or not, because it's the spirit in them, and that spirit is still working through them to destroy others.
Okay.
All right? So call me anytime, Steve, but start doing my silent prayer. Let me know what you think.
I will. I'll talk to you about it next time I call.
All right, buddy.
Thank you, Jesse.
You're welcome. I've come to realize that a whole lot of adult kids and young kids are hating their fathers with their mother's hatred, and they think that is their own. Kids don't care that daddy was an alcoholic or all that, or he left. They care that their soul want to reconnect to him. When you hear adult kids and young kids, oh, he was alcoholic, and that's that mother stuff she's fed to them. It's so unfortunate, but a lot of them are waking up, folks. They really, really are.